Okay, so this is a guide for comparative essay writing for VCE English reading and comparing Units 3 and 4, but also applicable to Units 1 and 2. Before we talk about essay writing, let's talk about the top two descriptors in the criteria. So, the top descriptor, sophisticated understanding of the texts and how they convey ideas, issues, and themes from different perspectives. Identification of highly significant connections and areas for comparison. What does this mean? It means you need to know the texts well, you need to know how the creators present ideas, i.e. or e.g. through action, language choices, film techniques, symbolism, characters, setting, etc. And you need to be able to pick relevant and precise moments to compare. The second criteria or descriptor in the criteria is sustained and insightful comparison that presents an enriched understanding of the ideas, issues, and themes in both texts through complex analysis of the similarities and/or differences, and considered use of textual evidence to support the comparative analysis. So what does this mean? Your essay should focus on the ideas expressed about the relevant themes in the essay topic. You should discuss how comparing the texts reinforces and extends these ideas. You should analyze similarities and/or differences. Notice and/or. So you could potentially go through your entire essay focusing just on similarities or differences, but the highest scoring essays will definitely explore both, because within similarities there are subtle differences, and within differences there are subtle similarities. And of course, you must use textual evidence to support your explanations, because you are trying to analyze and explain something, not merely describe something. So, if we try to simplify this even more, the first criteria is about knowing the texts well enough that you can pick the most relevant moments or scenes in the texts to compare. And the second criteria is that you actually do some comparison. You actually compare the two texts and discuss how comparing them can help us to understand an idea or learn an idea as a result of comparison. One thing to note is that you don't actually have to discuss both texts to equal proportions, but this depends on what you're comparing. So you don't need to go 50-50 in your essay or in your body paragraphs. For example, arguably, one could say that Ransom shows us how forgiveness liberates the soul, whereas in Invictus, Mandela states it, and it's kind of implied throughout the film, but it's not explored so much on an individual level. So in that case, you would probably spend more time in your body paragraph discussing this idea using Ransom as your main text, and then maybe Invictus as more of a supporting text. So you might have a 70-30 split or a 60-40 split if you want to use numbers to compare it. Though this is not an excuse for shallow thinking, so just because you don't need to discuss both texts to equal proportions doesn't mean you can go into lots of depth with one and just not into much with the other. It's about making good choices, as the first criteria points out. Alright, so let's talk about essay topics. As far as we know, these are the three main types of essay topics that you're going to see. The first one is a quote with a tag, a quote from one of the texts and a tag which tells you what to do. The second one is just a tag telling you what to do. And the third one's a bit more complicated. It's a tag with two quotations that you are supposed to use as the basis for your response. So let's go through each one and talk about how to tackle each one. So the first one is the quote with the tag. Basically, what you need to do is you need to understand what the tag is asking you to do and what themes are relevant in the actual tag. It says, compare how the two texts examine revenge and forgiveness. So obviously, the main themes are going to be revenge and forgiveness, and somehow the connection between those two. Now, you don't need to explicitly refer to the quote throughout your essay at all, but it would be smart to use it as a basis for some ideas. So revenge is futile, forgiveness is liberating is a pretty clear idea that is explored about the theme of revenge and about the theme of forgiveness. So you can use that as a prompt to help you to start generating ideas. The second one is simply a tag, so it tells you what to do. Compare how the two texts explore the idea that it is essential to know your enemy. So that's the main kind of theme, and you are going to be required to discuss how the two texts explore this particular idea or particular theme. Right, as I said before, the third one's a bit more complicated. It doesn't really tell you what to discuss. It doesn't give you the themes. You have to try and work them out. You have to try and infer from these quotations what the main theme is, or what the main themes are, and what are some relevant ideas that you can discuss. So obviously it's got something to do with words, it's got something to do with the power of words, it's got something to do with why words might be censored as well, and how what people say and do can, I suppose, enact change. There are technically three words that are very common in these essay topics, and you need to make sure you understand what they mean. They are how, examine, and explore. So what does how mean in this context? How refers to the ways the creators use to communicate their ideas. For example, characters, events, techniques, etc. Which means in your essay, you should not be simply describing what happens in the film and in the text or whatever texts you have, but you should be analyzing the ways that the creators use to communicate their ideas. How do we know that something? How does the creator show us that something? And the words examine and explore imply that you are to focus on the ideas and issues conveyed about the theme in the topic or themes. So in the first one, you're expected to examine and explore ideas and issues around revenge and forgiveness. In the second one, you are expected to examine and explore ideas that are communicated about why it's essential to know your enemy. So, to put it into questions to help us, with any essay topic, you need to think about what ideas are conveyed by the texts. Do they reinforce or extend one another? And how did the creators communicate these ideas? Just to recap the structure of your essay, there are two main structures: the block structure, where you analyze one text and then move on to the next one in the next paragraph. In the second paragraph, and in the fourth paragraph in this case, you should be comparing. Your focus should be on comparison, whereas the first and the third paragraphs could be mainly focused on analyzing text 1, be it Ransom or Invictus or whatever other text you are studying. The second structure is the woven structure, where you compare the two texts in the same paragraph. Now, in terms of the content of these two structures, there wouldn't be too much difference, except probably in your topic sentences and in the comparative phrases that you use. The second structure, the woven structure, also requires you to be more concise and precise, because, of course, you don't want to have a paragraph that goes over 1 page, much less a paragraph that extends to 2 pages. What you really need to think about is making good choices, making precise choices, and knowing the texts well. Okay, briefly, your introduction. So your introduction should have 3 components: an opening sentence or sentences that introduce the essay topic and the major themes and ideas in it in a general manner, but contextualized within the 2 texts. So if we take the first one from before about revenge and forgiveness, we don't want a general statement about revenge and forgiveness just in life in general, but we want a statement or statements about revenge and forgiveness in the context of the film Invictus and in the text Ransom, the novel Ransom. The second thing you need to do in your introduction is obviously introduce the texts and talk about how they relate to the essay topic, which means that you essentially need to state your contention there at some point. And the third part of your introduction, you should introduce the ideas to be discussed in your body paragraph. So what are the ideas that you are going to talk about in the body of your essay? So your body paragraphs, they need to include, one, a clear topic sentence responding to the prompt. Now, I can't stress enough how important a clear topic sentence is, not just for the reader of the essay, but for you, the writer of the essay. The topic sentence should focus on the ideas expressed by the creators of the texts. Do not simply introduce scenes or examples, because if you have a topic sentence that does that, you will merely go on to describe what happens in a scene or in an example without actually doing what you have been asked to do, which is to compare ideas and how they are communicated. Now, in the body of your body paragraphs, the actual use of evidence and explanation, you need to be comparing throughout. You may wish to deal with text 1 first and then use text 2 to compare, and you have to use evidence. Your skills from text response earlier in the year, dealing with your other text that you wrote analytically on, should help you with this. In fact, it definitely will help you with this. One big difference is that you have to use comparative phrases throughout to show that you are actually doing some comparison. I would suggest that at the final part of your body paragraph, you should have a brief explanation of what the comparison can help us to learn or understand about a certain idea, issue, or theme. So what is actually being reinforced and what is actually being extended. Now, I mentioned comparative phrases before. We haven't been using a booklet throughout this year, but you can easily look these up on the internet or refer to any other resources that we have available in the classroom or on the portal. You should use these comparative phrases throughout to signpost and indicate where you are actually comparing and what you are comparing. It's also really important that you use these correctly. I can't stress enough to you how many times I've seen students simply insert a comparative phrase without really knowing what it means. Not only does it look really silly, it also shows myself and will show the examiner at the end of the day that you don't really know what you're doing. So make sure whatever ones you are going to use, and I'm sure that you will recycle some that you prefer, that you actually know how to use them. So for the rest of this video, I would suggest that you pause at these different points, these different junctures, and have a look at the sample writing here. Neither of the following 2 examples will be complete, but gives you an idea of the actual comparison that you need to do. Okay, and your conclusion. So your conclusion should be relatively brief because you should have spent most of your time writing the body of your essay. All you need to do is reword the essay topic in your contention. You should summarize the paragraph ideas, and it's always helpful to close with a moral message from both texts about the essay topic.